Hi, this is Nancy Ralsma from On Point TV and Quilting with Nancy, coming to you direct from my home studio in the great Grand Rapids, Michigan. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate when you've come to visit my channel. In today's video, I'm going to take you through the steps of doing the small fractured glass block. Now, behind me are two samples of it. This sample has just the fractured glass blocks, and these are going to finish approximately 6 inches. And over here is the one that I'm working on that I'm going to combine the large fractured glass blocks, that's hard to say, the large fractured glass blocks with the small ones, and I'm turning this into a quilt as you go. So you got to wait a little bit, couple more weeks till I'm going to be ready to show you that because I'm getting the book ready. But this fractured glass and the large fractured glass, those both come from my book, and this is what the book looks like. The link is below this description or this video, and that takes you to my website, which is quiltingwithnancy.com. Pretty easy to remember. So this process is a foundation pieced process, and this is the only way that I could make this process work with small blocks. So I showed last week how to make the large blocks, and those are traditional pieced. And many people commented and emailed me thinking, well, can I make this with a smaller block? It is my experience that anything smaller than a 10-inch square to start with for the large fractured glass blocks doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work, but you're just going to have to trust me. I've tried it and students have tried it, and they always come out kind of so wonky that it really is just kind of silly looking. So I have successfully done the large blocks from an 11-inch finished all the way up to a 16-inch finished block. So if you want to do the large one, refer back to the video, and I'll have the link below for that also. But today we're going to work on the foundation piece blocks to make them smaller. And this is a little bit of a unique technique. It took me a little while to figure out how I could do this and make it work, because it's not like a normal foundation piece block where you just cut some pieces and then you fit them all in. Could it be done that way? It could, but you would end up with a lot of leftover scrappy fabrics. And with this technique, you don't. Pretty much what you cut is what you're going to be using, with maybe some minor trimming along the way. So let's get started. So these are the fabrics that I'm going to use. These are some of my hand-painted fabrics. There's a video out there on the ones that I did with these little glitters on, and I'm getting ready to do a large piece of fabric video also for the borders, and I'll show you how to do that at a later time, but that's for my quilt as you go method with the easy sashing. But here are the 5 pieces that I'm using. So there's, some color variation. I didn't go wild and crazy. Hey, word of warning though, now that I remember again, is you don't want to do this technique with a fabric that doesn't really have a right or wrong side. Now that might seem silly, but it's my experience, especially with students, that when they try to do this with a batik that does not have a right or wrong side, sometimes with batiks you can, or a solid, it can get kind of confusing. Just leave it at that. So I recommend that you don't do that. Although batiks would look super fabulous in these blocks, it does require an extra effort of concentration. Can you do it? Well, of course you can do it. I just want to give you a word of warning that it won't be the easiest thing that you've ever done. All right? So just word of warning. Okay, back to my fabrics. So these fabrics, I need to cut a 7.5-inch square. So I'm going to line up I've got my 9.5-inch ruler here. I'm going to use my bigger cutter for this. And I'm going to cut this. Oops. Cutting all 5 at once. Now I'm going to keep these. These I use for some of my improvisationally pieced quilts. One more turn. Going to take this to 7.5. Well, I guess I cut that a little. I could have saved a little bit more fabric. Now I have this piece here. I don't know why I didn't do that correctly to begin with, but close enough is good for me. All right. So here are my 5 pieces of fabric that I have cut into 7.5-inch squares. Now I'm going to move these off for just a second and show you the cutting template. This is the template that you will use for cutting down those 7-inch squares. So you do want to cut it out pretty much on the line, only because if you've ever tried to cut paper through fabric, so if you have that paper on the top, sometimes it can get a little messy. And this is going to be on top, but the way that I do it, it seems to work. So I want to really cut this down first. All right. And I am going to label the sections. Okay. So here I have labeled the sections, and those sections are going to correlate with the foundation piecing papers that I'll be getting to next. So A, B, C, D, and E. A, B, C, D, and E. Now keep in mind, in the book, there are 3 different foundation pieced patterns. So 3 of them that have these different cuts on them. So you will be able to get a variety. I'm just going to show you, I think this is block 2. But there are 3 different ones in the book with the cutting template and with the foundation piecing templates. All right, so now we have this, and we're going to pull our fabrics back in. Oh, you know what? Before you cut your fabrics, I do recommend that you spray size them first. Use some of the, whatever is your favorite. This one happens to be my favorite until somebody comes along with something else, I guess. This one I really, really like. This is the one from Magic. And it's faultless. It's really wonderful. I absolutely love the spray nozzle. That is, honest to Pete, my favorite part of this is the spray nozzle. All right, so I didn't have to do that because I have painted fabrics, and with painted fabrics, you don't have to do that because they are already a little bit stiff. So now I'm going to cut these down. So I'm going to line up my ruler right there on that line, and I'm going to press pretty hard with my ruler because I want it to go through all 5 layers of the fabric and the paper. All right, then I'm going to take that and move it out of the way. Then I'm going to spin again to go to the D block. Just follow along. Be sure that you've written on here the placements as they are in the foundation pieces. Oops, didn't quite get through that one. Let's try that one more time. There. All right. That's A, B, nope, that's E, D, A, B, C, D. Yes, now I got to go to C. I'll learn my alphabet. Oops, I'm going to straighten that back out. I mentioned how the paper likes to move, and it does, and there's just not really too much you can do about it. You know what? I'm going to try and use my bigger cutter and see if that makes a difference. Oh, that does. Yeah. Okay, use your bigger cutter for that. That's going to work out a little bit better. All right, that's C, and now I'm going to cut between A and B. Oops, I want to get that line back up again. There. So 4 cuts with 5 pieces of fabric. So now let's put these back in order. So this will be the first section that I cut between A and B. I'm sorry, that I sew between A and B. Then I'll sew A and B to C. Then I'll sew ABC to D, and then ABCD to E. The next step, though, is to take and move some of the fabric. So I'm going to leave A just like it is. Okay? And on B pile, I'm going to take the top fabric and move it to the bottom and put my B right here. On the C fabric, I'm going to take 2 pieces, 1, 2, going to move them to the bottom. So this is the same process that we did for the large blocks. On the D, I'm going to take 3, 1, 2, 3, move that. And E, I'm going to take 4, or just move the one on the bottom to the top. All right. Now, so that you don't get all confused with the order that you're piecing them, there, get those back in line. I want you to take that piece that has the letter on it and put it underneath the first piece of fabric. Now, I am a big advocate of chain piecing and doing lots and lots of blocks all at once. This is not the time for you to try that. every time I or a student tries to do this technique where they kind of chain piece things, it all gets kind of messed up. So I'm not going to recommend that you do that. Now, if you decide to do that, go for it. It's on you, not me. All right. So when you have moved the paper underneath just the first layer of fabric, these are the 5 fabrics that are going to be in this block. The same 5 fabrics are going to be in every block, but they will have a different placement with that. All right. So now I'm going to go to my foundation piecing templates. Now I am using a vellum here. A vellum is a paper that you can kind of see through a little bit, and that'll just kind of help it easier for you to see what I'm doing. I have 5 copies of this. Now I'm going to cut this out 1/4 inch larger than the actual template line. Do not cut on the dotted line. In this case, in my book, that's a little dotted line. That is your final seam allowance. The solid line is the design line, but you're not cutting on the dotted line. You are cutting 1/4 inch. Whoops. Uh-oh, that probably slid everything around at the bottom. 1/4 inch larger than that. And this is true for any time you're doing any foundation piecing, that you cut out your templates 1/4 inch larger. Oops, I moved a little bit. Oops, I better get that back in line. Sorry. There. I want them all to be pretty much the same. There. So now I have 5 of the foundation templates are ready to go. I'm just going to take one of them because I'm only going to use one at a time. Going to move this out from here. I will be coming back to that though. And here, I told you I messed them all back up. There. All right. So this is what we are going to start with. I realize now I forgot my pin cushion, so I'll just use these pins that I have handy. Okay. All right. Now the next tool that you need to know about is the add an 1/8 ruler. So this is the classic add a 1/4 ruler. This is the original, the 6 inch. It also comes as an add a 1/4 plus, which means it has a beveled edge. It comes as a 12 inch, an 18 inch, and then there's a pink one. So a lot of different ones for the add a 1/4. But for this project, because these grout seams are so small, I don't want you to use your add a 1/4. I want you to use your add an 1/8. Now, this 6 inch one is just big enough. You have to slide a little bit to work with that. So if you have the 6 inch, that will work. I am going to use the 8 inch add an 1/8 plus. Do you see the plus there? And that means that it has this beveled edge on the bottom. So that's going to make it a little bit easier for all of the folding that I do. All right. So we are going to now flip this over, and I'm going to position the A piece. Remember the A piece? I'm going to put that right over the A position, and I'm going to pin it in place. You know what? Oh, I found it. Oh, thank goodness. I'm going to glue it in place. This is what I really like to do. I like to take my first one, put some glue there, and I won't use the glue anymore, but just for that first one, and it just kind of helps put it right into position. All right, I'm going to flip it over so you'll be able to really see what I mean by that. The position is that it is there. Now you can see it. It is completely covering the A1 position. It is approximately halfway through the A2 position, and it's covering the C and the B2. That's exactly where I want this piece to be. So next, I'm going to take the grout, and I'm going to work with black grout on this. So that is the wrong side of the fabric to the wrong side, the underside of the paper. Now I'm going to put the grout here, and this is where I do want to use a pin. Do I always use a pin? No, I don't. I just find that when I'm having to go from here to my machine camera, it makes it easier for things not to quite move around so much. I like to actually use glue. Glue works a lot, but for this, it really doesn't work so well. All right, so I'm ready to take this to my sewing machine, and I am going to sew on this line that is between the A1 in the A2 position. I am going to start right there at that line. I am not going to start past it. I'm going to start right on it, and I'm going to end right on it. So at my machine, I have taken and moved my stitch length down to a 2.0 stitch length. I find that's easier to get the paper off. I do want to make sure my fabric is lined up underneath. And I'm going to start here, and you'll also notice that I have an open toe applique foot on. That makes it easier to see where I'm sewing. I highly recommend that. All right, oops, you know what? My stitch length is not down. I must have turned my machine off at some point. There, all right? So now I've stitched, and I stop right there at that line, lift my presser foot, cut off the top and the bottom. Oops, if I can get my scissors in there. There it is. It's hard to see the position I have to be on. All right, so I have done that line of stitching. Now I'm going to cut off my threads. I don't like having these extra threads hanging around. There's the thread at the bottom too. And remove that pin. Okay. The next step is to press this seam. Now you can try doing it with your thumbnail, kind of get that to finger press. There's other tools out there, but I got to tell you, the best tool for the job is your Clover mini iron. This is the version 1. There's a version 2 with a red kind of safety thing around it. I don't like that one. It gets too hot. And I store mine in my big old Wonder Woman mug. So when I'm not using it, it is sat in the mug. So I know that it's not burning myself or any of my tools. Trust me, that's happened before. And I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3. Right there. And I know I was right on top of my mat, but it's okay. It's not going to be a problem. Now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut off at the angle that continues this angle here. Going to cut that off and cut this one off on the right hand side also. Okay, using my scissors. Now I flip over the piece. I call that the pancake flip. And I'm going to get my add an 1/8 ruler, and here is the beveled edge on it. I'm going to place the edge of the bevel right there at the ruler, right there at my next sew line. Now I'm going to flip this up, fold it, and now using the little lip, there's a little lip on the underside here, going to go right next to the paper and cut. Okay, so now I know where my next piece is going to connect. So flipping it back over, I have this little tiny seam. Now I'm going to go underneath in this case, and I'm going to get my B piece. This is my next piece, B. Okay, I'm going to take her. This is where she's going to end up. And I'm going to place that edge, the new edge, right on the edge that I just cut. And then in this case, I am going to pin it so I can get it to my machine. There, all right. So it is placed just past, right there on that edge. That means that it will be going into the edge of the A2 piece. Now going to my machine again. Get into position. Starting on that line and sew. Now, if I had a thread cutter on this machine, I would be using it, but I don't, so that's why I have to use these scissors. All right, back to the cutting. I'm going to take off these threads. I'm really bothered by lots of threads hanging out, so I always take time to cut those threads. Now flip this over. Ooh, sparkly, and press. I know I'm pressing right on my mat, but I'm on top of the fabric, and it does not hurt the mat, so don't worry about that. All right, so now I have A and B done. A and B. My next piece is the B2 between A, B, and C. So now I'm going to take, again, my add a 1/8 ruler with the beveled edge, do the fold. If you don't have the add a 1/8 plus, you can put a piece of cardboard in there to help you with the cut, but the plus is actually made to make it a little bit easier, and it does. All right, that's the side I've just trimmed. Now I am going to place my next piece. And I'm going to try not to pin it this time just because it takes extra long time. And going to my machine. This time, because the design is actually way off here, actually, yeah, I can start off the design line because it's at an edge. And you want to do that so that it actually secures that edge. But up here at the top, you can see that the design stops on the inside, so I'm going to stop sewing right there. I always have people will always ask me, will that seam still be secure? Because I stopped right there, and it will. I've done tons and tons and tons of these and washed them all, and they're just fine. Cut off my threads. Oop, that worked. All right. Press this. I'm going to trim this off so it goes even with the last piece. Now I'm ready to flip it over and trim my next piece. So as we're going here, you're going to start to see how the steps repeat themselves. We are going to trim. After we trim, we place. So I need to find my C1 piece. Whoops. My pieces keep moving. Here is my C1. My C1 will position right here. Going to put that on the edge that I just trimmed and go to my machine. Again, I am off the design. The design line goes all the way off the edge, so start off the edge of it. Confirm that you're lined up underneath there. But as it gets to the end of this, you see that it is, I'm going to stop right there, okay? Right there at the end. And cut off my threads. Oops. And press. All right, so I've got 3 of my fabrics down now. It's looking quite sparkly. This particular version of this quilt where I'm putting the small ones and big ones together, I'm calling the Sparkle Fractured Glass. So now I'm ready to trim again. So flip it over so you're on the paper side. Fold on the next sew line and kind of swoop your ruler out and flip it over. So now you're trimming this at 1/8. Now we're ready to place. In this case, the placing is the black grout. So it's black grout and then the color. So right there. So right there. So this time I'm going to start on the inside edge, right there at the start of the line. Confirm that my piece is positioned right. And I like using the vellum because you can see through it, but it is quite a bit more expensive than the other foundation paper that I use, so it really is up to you. If you can afford it, go ahead, use the vellum. It is actually a little bit easier when you can see through it. Some people absolutely swear by it. I think it's really good. It's twice as expensive. So generally speaking, I'm going to use the Carol Doak foundation paper from C&T. Okay, there. All right. And trim. So the process is sew, trim, place, sew, press, trim, place, sew, press, trim, place. So there's my trim. I'm going to go for my next piece, which is D. Right here. I love this one. It's got great sparkles to it. Place that so it's right on that cut line that I just made. Start on the inside on this one. Sewing all the way off the edge of the design because the line goes to the edge. And that kind of helps hold everything in place. People always ask, why do you do that? Why don't you just stop on the line as you did with the other ones? It's because the edges don't end up being sewn down. So trust me on it. Sew all the way to the edge. Flip that over. So that was sew. This is press. Now we trim. So trim on the next sew line. We've only got 2 lines to go. Flip over to trim and add an 1/8. I do have a nice sharp blade in there, so be sure you've replaced your blade. It is a pain when it's kind of dull, pain and no fun, and we want to have fun. Placing my next piece, so after trim comes place. And this time, the design, the last line, the design is going to start off, so I'm going to go all the way from that corner, then on the line, then I'm going to come all the way off the design. So only on the final 2 pieces can you do that. Oops, left my scissors. There. All right, going to trim these 2 little threads. There. And press. So sew, press. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you might want to see that. Okay. Sew, press. I forgot to switch my camera. Forgive me. Okay. So I'm down here all by myself, so it's not like I have somebody else to tell me these things. Now we're going to trim. And this is our last trim. And place. So I'm going to go under here and get my very last one. Here's my A, B, C, D. So when I pick this one up, that means that I've done everything on the first layer. When I go for my second one, I will then take those papers and put them underneath. I'll show you that when I come back. So now we're going to sew this. So place this on the design line, or on that line that I just trimmed. And again, with this, I get to start off the paper. I think my fabric moved a little bit. Yep, it did. I can see it there. There, get that back in line. There. Going to start off the paper. And sew all the way through and come off the other side. There. All right. This time I switched the camera right away. Aren't you proud of me? Okay. With our last piece, we press. Yeah, I was off that one a little bit, wasn't I? All right. So you want to see what happened here? I'm not going to change it. But when I placed that last one, I went too far to this side. So this side where that pointy point is, when I press this, is going to be a little bit lower than it really needs to be. Let me show you. You can kind of see right there. Now, in this case, because I'm actually trimming these down a little farther than normal, I'm just going to leave it. But I should have taken from here. This piece should have been moved up, so about 1/4 of an inch, and if I had done that, this would have been 1/4 of an inch and everything would have been covered. But as I mentioned, with these particular blocks, I am actually trimming them a little bit smaller than this to fit with the blocks that I'm working on. All right? So here, this should be trimming to 6.5, but for what I'm doing, I'm going to trim it to a 6 inch. So here is the place where I'm a little bit low. So I'm going to be sure that I get my 6 inch above that. So if you were doing a 6.5 and that happened, what do you do? Yeah, what do you do when that happens? You actually need to take off what you'd worked on. And the way to do that is to put a piece of tape on the seam itself. So I would take a piece of tape and put it right here on the paper, Scotch tape, so that the paper does not all pull away, and then take that seam out. If you try to take the seam out without putting tape on, you just might end up with a big old hole in your paper. But for me and this project, I'm going to trim this down to a 6 inch, so I'm okay. I don't need to do that. I hope that didn't confuse you. I understand that I'm not doing the hole like it would normally have been. Okay. So now that is trimmed. Oh, before I would trim it, I would actually spray size it. Now in this case, again, because I have my painted fabrics, they are totally permanent on the fabric, even when washed. But because of the stability of them, I don't really need to do that spray sizing. All right. The next step is to take off the paper. And when you take off the paper, take it off in reverse order that you put it on. So I'm going to start with E1, and I want to crease it. And then come here and pull the paper. Now, as much as I like the vellum because I can see through it, the vellum I find is a little bit harder to pull off than the foundation paper, the other one from C&T. There. All right. Then you've got to get inside here so you can kind of pull the seam, and see how the paper just comes flying out from the seam. And fold that back. Oops, I missed one little bit up here. There. So when I'm usually working on these kinds of things, I'll make, 5 to 10 blocks and then save them so that I'm spending the time upstairs with my husband, and then I'm taking off the paper while we're sitting watching TV. So it's our together time, although I'm still getting something done. Not to tell you, how to do things like that, but I find it more enjoyable to sit with Bill when I'm doing this kind of stuff. All right. So that's what I would do. I would take all the paper off, and then my block is done. How I set it is totally up to me. But once one block is done, you'll go to the second block. And for the second block, you're going to do the same thing. You'll take your paper, put it underneath the first fabric, come to the second one underneath the first fabric. So just taking one piece of fabric, putting the identification label right underneath it. And if all has gone according to plan, you should have 5 new fabrics. So this would make my next block. So that's it. That is how you do the foundation piecing for the fractured glass blocks. It is a little bit different. Having to kind of pre-cut those makes it a little bit different. Could you do it with just, taking bigger pieces of fabric? You could, but it wouldn't then be like the fractured glass where the 5 blocks share the same fabric. But, maybe you've got some other design in mind, which is always a great possibility. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll put links below to the book and items like that. If you have any questions, you can just contact me at quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. Have a great day.